Bet you never thought I owned a Golden Girls shirt, huh? Think again, my friends. Hey everyone, what's going on? Back with a new video today. Today I'm going to be discussing my first ever read by Anne Rice, and that is Interview with the Vampire, a timeless classic of immortality, morality, love, and trying to find oneself. This one is going to be pretty interesting to discuss. Like I mentioned, this is my first read by Anne Rice. I've heard of, again, many stories by her. This is actually the first book in the Vampire Chronicles, and I intend on reading more of the Vampire Chronicles. Since I finished the first book in the Vampire Chronicles, I will get to the others in the series, but I will get to them at a different time. But let's talk about Anne Rice's first book in the Chronicles. From the beginning, when I started reading Interview with the Vampire, I got familiar vibes from this story. This book actually reminded me of a book that I read, and I have done a book review. And if you want to check out that link, it will be right here up above, or I will leave it down in the description below. And that is Jay Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire. Again, this is a very thick book, but this was an actually really intriguing read. And for those fantasy lovers out there, this is a must read, especially if you love vampires and fantasy. Before we dive into Interview with the Vampire, as I was discussing briefly about fantasy, I must give a shout out to my good friend Theo. His channel is Rekindled Reader. I highly recommend you go check his channel out. He's got great content. He's a great guy. Talks about different types of genre, mostly fantasy, but he is a great guy and overall has an amazing channel. So go check him out. In Interview with the Vampire, we are following the main character and listening to his story. His name is Louis Pont du Lac, who actually just goes by Louis in this story. Louis the Vampire sits down with this boy, and in the story is just known as the boy. And the boy is recording Louis' thoughts and memories of the story of how he became the immortal vampire he is today. While Louis tells his story to the boy and he's interviewing, he is telling his story of how he became the immortal entity that he is talking to the boy, and how he struggled in his mortal life and how he continues to struggle in his immortal life. So it is a very nice twist and turn story. Interview with the Vampire is a gothic horror novel, and it's very interesting to read because Anne Rice has a way with words as she is telling the story. As Louis is getting interviewed by the boy, he is telling his story of his hardships and what he has gone through in his immortal life and the battles he's embraced, the love and the losses of his life. And it's a really, heart-wrenching story, but it is heartwarming in some cases. But this is a very good way to start off the Vampire Chronicles, and I am interested in reading the other ones, like I said. So as we go through the story of Louis' life, he is talking to the boy of how he comes in contact with obviously becoming a vampire, and he comes into this creature named Lestat. Lestat is also a vampire. With the connection that Louis makes with Lestat, he is actually going through battles, and then he gets on later going through the story. I'm not going to spoil anything, but he runs into different characters throughout his life. During the story, Louis is describing his thought process on how he became a vampire, but not only that, but he is questioning the way of life and the purpose of life. Even though he is an immortal vampire, he is questioning what is life and what is for a future if he cannot die, or Louis lives longer than the lovers that he has embraced in his life and brought into his life. It's a very emotional story. It's an emotional roller coaster going here and there, but again, I will say I recommend you listen to the Interview with the Vampire on Audible. Again, the way the narrator, he fluctuates his voice to change different characters, that always helps me when I'm reading a story, especially from a new author, because again, this is my first read by Anne Rice, and I do want to read more by her, but yeah, this one I think would have been a little troubling if I didn't have Audible to help me. I give Interview with the Vampire 4 stars. I really enjoyed the first quarter of the book. It kept me turning the pages, and I couldn't really put the book down. As soon as I got to almost a little over past the halfway point, it wasn't slowing down, but there was parts where I'm like, it was kind of descriptive. Now, authors I know need to have descriptions in their novel, but sometimes they can, put a little too much description and too much details into their work, and Anne Rice kind of does that in certain parts of it. Giving it 4 stars, I did enjoy the whole story overall. The end of Interview with the Vampire gave me those Jay Kristoff's, Empire of the Vampire vibes as well. The beginning and the end, it was somewhat similar, but I did really enjoy it. Throughout this whole novel, novel, Anne Rice was bringing Louis to life in a matter of speaking by his emotions, the love he has for certain characters he meets, and then obviously the battle with his own demons and the demons that he encounters along the way. The whole process is very interesting. It's very enticing, enlightening in certain aspects of life. And with Louis telling his story to this mortal boy who is just curious, and he's playing his tape recorder, he's got to switch tapes back and forth. Now, I will say that I kind of wish that the interview part with the boy and Louis was kind of going on more. Throughout the story, it was obviously just saying Louis' story. He was just telling his perspective of what was happening. And again, it's interview with the vampire. I get that, but I kind of wish it would have the more interaction between Louis and the boy during the interview. But it did in the beginning, and I was enjoying that as well as the end. I highly recommend, if you have not checked out Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, it is a good read. This book is only like 350 pages. I know there's a lot of versions out there, but this was actually a very good version, and I do highly recommend it, especially if you love vampires. Again, this novel has gothic horror written all over it. It has the fantasy aspect to it as well, and it has certain, kind of historical fiction aspects in certain places, but I do recommend it. And like I always say, my friends, please read your book cover to cover. We'll see y'all later.